Well, I have another question for you. How was getting out of Azkaban? Was that difficult?
Yeah.
Well, welcome back to the Can You Say That? Conversations I have with my mom. So today, I'm Ambria. I should probably put that in there. Today we're actually talking about parenting and the major differences that we found between when I was born in the mid-90s to when my son was born in 2022.
So the problem with that is that it changed in the middle of that too, like over and over and over.
Right.
So it's not like 20 years separate. Yeah, because you and your brother are 5 years apart.
Right.
And so it's not like it's nothing, for 20 years, everything just stayed chill for a little while, then wham, change it. No, it was like, they were like, oh, hi, it's Tuesday. So now we're going to change everything we've told you up until now. So parenting, it's an interesting thing.
So if you want to hear the conversations I have with my mom, go ahead and like, subscribe, and do all of those things so you can keep up with the new conversations we're having. So what are we talking about today?
Parenting. It's one of the things that I think a lot of mother-daughter relationships talk a ton on, and women in particular tend to feel a little more judged about how they parent. And often it's by the other women in their lives because, like so many other things in life, we are harder on each other than men ever are.
Yes, I 100% agree. So for some quick backstory for both of us, go ahead, say it. Say sorry, production.
Yeah, sorry, production.
So we got pregnant and became moms at very, very different junctures in our life.
Yep.
We talked about this a little bit in our why we did this podcast. So if you haven't seen that one, I'll link it somewhere up here. And we talked a little bit about this though. My son was my firstborn. He was born in 2022 at the very beginning. Me thinking that it was the wrong year for a brief moment when you gave me that look.
I was thinking it was the wrong year for a brief moment too. And I was like, no, yeah.
But he was born at the very, very beginning of 2022. And he is now roughly 6 months old. I was married. I had a career. I actually had just bought and moved into the house that we were living in 6 months prior-ish when we found out we were pregnant. And frankly, my pregnancy news was received very well by everybody but me, actually. I was the first one to be like, nope, don't know about this.
Oh, but that was like 3 seconds long because 2 seconds after you found out, you were at our house. And originally you were like, I'm only going to tell my mom that I'm pregnant. And then you told everybody.
I needed my stepdad to know, especially because I needed someone who was as excited as I was. And as I was going through this like wild emotional gambit because I wasn't, my pregnancy was not planned.
I was excited.
I know you were.
Is not the same kind of excited. And very rarely am I outwardly as excited as pretty much most other human beings.
Like my stepdad started buying onesies like 2 minutes after I announced. Yeah. And we announced we found out at 5 weeks with a home pregnancy test or something. It was really it was rapid fire. Like we were remodeling our kitchen. Like my husband had gone out to get wine coolers and my period had been late. We were like, oh, we'll just check and make sure. Because at that point I'd only been off my birth control about 3 months. So we were like,
Well, and it wasn't uncommon for you not to be regular.
Right.
You were kind of hit and miss for a while there.
Which was the only reason, part of our deal, and this was a private deal made between me and my husband. But he was like, hey, I would feel more comfortable when you are late, if you want to drink, that you actually take an at-home pregnancy test and just confirm that it's negative.
I don't know how private you thought that was. I'm pretty sure most of us knew.
I'm pretty sure a lot of people knew, but
plus you drink with us.
I do. When I do drink, it is typically with you guys. So I know that was something you guys probably were aware of, but to the outside world, that wasn't public knowledge.
No.
And we were super used to negative pregnancy tests. They were always negative. So the first test I got where it was positive wasn't ready.
You have to clarify that you guys weren't necessarily actively trying. Part of the reason you were taking a pregnancy test is because your hormones were all whacked out.
Yeah.
And they were trying to figure out birth control, non-birth control, this kind of birth control, that kind of birth control.
And we actually didn't even think I had ovulated that month because we were also tracking my ovulation cycle. So we're now looking back, obviously I must have because we got pregnant. But initially we actually didn't even think I had ovulated that month. And then Yep. About 3 weeks later, we found out we were pregnant.
So
yours was different. Yours was very different.
it was. So I was 17.
Yep.
I had actually gone that day to get my senior portraits done.
I didn't know that.
I don't know if you realize this, but yeah, the one that they presented at graduation and in the yearbook, those were taken in probably August of that year.
Okay.
But the day that I went and had my senior portraits, actually like all of them done.
Yeah.
I found out that day that I was pregnant. That afternoon, actually, that morning, I did not know I was pregnant. And by 2:00 in the afternoon, I did.
Wow.
But
you didn't...
I was 17. It was February. Ironically, remember this, February 16th, for two reasons. One, it's your cousin's birthday.
Yeah.
And two was the fact that I had gone in the month prior to start Depo. And they wouldn't let me start Depo because I was coming off of a different birth control and I had all these other problems. And so they were like, well, we don't want to start Depo. We'll start Depo next month.
Okay.
So they said, come back in after your next period and we'll start you on Depo.
Okay.
And then I didn't have one.
Which wasn't uncommon for you either.
My cycle was definitely not regular. That's why they wanted to get me right after my next period. They were like, we're going to start your Depo. And then, I found out I was pregnant.
I didn't realize. I know that story now.
Right.
But for a good chunk of my childhood, I actually did not. I always knew I was the product of a teenage pregnancy. That was never something that you hid. It was always very, very, well known.
How do I hide? How do you hide that? I mean,
people do.
They try, but they're usually not successful. And then later on, their kid feels like this massive amount of betrayal because they were like, oh, you guys lied about when you got married, or you lied about when you got pregnant, or you lied about whatever. I didn't see the point. You were eventually going to figure out that, your math, your dad and I were married this date in 95, and the baby in the pictures was you.
Sure
so
was.
It never seemed like that big of a deal.
October of 94. And then you and my father weren't married until February of 95.
Yep.
Yeah. So.
But yeah, we were very different. You've heard the story about when we announced that I was pregnant.
I love this story.
My mom was super upset with me and ultimately started telling me rather, she didn't actually yell. She was just super angry.
Yeah.
And she told me I was grounded. And I remember looking at her and actually saying, oh, okay, Mom, because what? I'm going to learn my lesson this way? You're grounding me because now that means I won't get pregnant at 17 again. I promise this won't happen twice. And then she wanted to go see her dad because he had gone home to tell his mom. And then all the adults decided they were going to get together and talk about what we were going to do.
This is something I have to give my father credit for and you credit for. I don't know if at 17, that's something I would have been my first thought to be like, I found out. And within days, I'm telling my parents.
It wasn't our first thought. We really, really, really talked about, did we want to tell anybody? But one of the things we were worried about is I'd had such bad problems with my endometriosis and the fact that I was told I couldn't have kids. And then I was in massive pain. And we were a little worried I was having it. And actually, they were worried about this for a while. That it was a tubular pregnancy, which would have changed everything.
And would have killed you long term.
Could have if we had ignored it. Yeah. But that was part of the reason we felt like we had to tell.
Some credit there because I do know a lot of teenagers. I actually know a set of people who got pregnant in high school who were about 17, 18 when they got pregnant. And there was a lot I have since talked to the male half of that, and he apparently didn't tell his parents until she was 6 or 7 months along. So good on at least you guys for being go ahead, say it. Sorry production. But at least good on you two for being okay, the amount of trouble we're going to get in, not worth getting sick, having to go to the hospital, dying potentially if it was a tubular pregnancy.
And, they'd already told me they didn't think I could have kids. And so any complications after I got pregnant would have just increased my chances of never having any more.
Right.
So, but then it was a matter of now what? Now this is the choices we made. Here's where we are. What do we do?
Right.
Not to get into the whole other discussion. But we went through all the gambit of, do we do an abortion? Do we do an adoption? Do we keep the baby? Do we get married? Do we not get married? We went through all that.
Right.
And the grown-ups around were deciding our lives for us, or at least trying to.
I love that, by the way. I'm just going to note grown-ups, because what you mean is your parents.
Yeah. My mom, my dad's wife at that time, not the woman he's currently with.
Right, because it's a different person.
Correct. And your dad's mother,
right.
But not his dad.
But also not the people who would inevitably have a child to care for long term. That is something I'm hearing, is that
looking at it
adults.
So taking the perspective of 40s looking back.
Yeah.
It's fear. 100%. They're scared. They're afraid. What are you doing? Are you going to, everybody at some point or another told me that it was a bad idea and I was going to, have you thought this through? Are you ruining your life? Are you spoiling? Because I was in an honor student. I had plans to go to college.
You had like a partial scholarship or something,
I did
didn't
not.
you?
I was going to go live in another state.
Oh, that's right.
My older brother, because school was so much cheaper outside of
where you were living
living in California.
Yeah.
And so even for an out-of-state resident, it was cheaper.
Which is
bananas. I could have stayed there for I think I was going to be able to be in resident credit, but that doesn't matter now.
Not anymore.
But for those of you who are wondering, I in fact did go to college. I have an associate's degree, a bachelor's degree, and a master's degree. So to everybody who was like, you're throwing your life away, you're not going to go to college, you can suck it, because I have the kid and I have all the degrees.
And you have three. But you have 3 degrees in 3 different things.
I do.
That is the other thing.
Total side note, though. So that being said, that was a very different thing.
Yeah.
Now, once you were born, I think that probably there was a lot more similarities in a lot of the parenting advice and the things that were happening.
I don't think so.
And the way things happened. No. So here's what I mean by that. Like the random advice, you did get a ton of random advice. Oh my
goodness, yeah.
After and I don't, separating the pregnancy and delivery, even
we'll talk about that.
From children, from when you had the baby. But you had to have gotten all of the random advice. That part was still the same. And you're already, as a new mom, you're like, hey, is this right? This doesn't feel right. This, people are like, oh, this is natural. Everything should be natural. And you're like, this doesn't feel natural. I don't know what this is. So you had all of that happening while you're getting all this advice. So so when you were born, they were really starting the SIDS movement of sleep no, that was your brother. When you were born, it was sideways. They were suggesting that you put a wedge in the mattress.
Oh my goodness.
That the mattress would tip just a slight angle like that. And so that your baby would sleep on their side, not on their back, because the idea was, people were so afraid of SIDS, so they didn't want them sleeping on their stomach.
Right.
But there was still the belief that you were prone to choke as an infant if you were put on your back. So they were like, put them on their side. So that was the advice, like the hardcore advice. Everybody was being told, sleep your baby on their side. And then by the time your brother was born 5 years later, I swear to God, people would have freaking shot me if I'd have been like, I'm sleeping him on his side, because everything was the back on their back, on their back, on their back.
Yep. Which has now actually it has changed back and forth, I have to imagine. But as of 2022, when my son was born, they did tell us, put him on his back. Do not let him sleep on his front until he has the capability to roll over and lift his head. Which was wild, because now I put that kid on his back and he hates it. He will fight me over sleeping on his back 100%.
So, the difference is, and this is also where you get into confidence, but I put your brother on his belly even when he was younger because he didn't sleep.
Oh, that's right. Bobby was so sick.
He would sleep 15, well, not just that, but he would sleep 15-minute chunks. Sleeping is definitely one of those advice things that you get random advice from people all the time. And so I ended up letting him sleep on his stomach
just to try
because he would sleep. So those are all those things. So that kind of thing was the same. Everybody's like, you know what I would do? Do you know what I think you should do? That's been the same. I bet you for way before us and way after us as moms. Moms will always go, do you know what I think? No, lady, random person in the grocery store. I don't know what you think.
That was the hard
part.
I
don't really care.
That was the hard part, is that people of my friend group, obviously of your friend group, you were the first to get pregnant too.
I was.
But of my friend group, it was all kind of this age where it is normal now to get pregnant. You kind of plan it kind of thing. And yet still people were super opinionated who didn't have kids. That I was super unprepared
and had no
for.
dog in the fight of this baby, right?
No. So
like I said, random person at the grocery store. Thanks for your parenting advice.
Or Facebook. That was
Facebook. That's where social media has turned into this whole other nightmare.
Yeah, I won't do like the mommy groups because I'm just like, I can't watch any of this. I can't watch people be mean to other people for the sake of like, I'm right in my parenting.
So the only thing I would throw in there is, although they are mean, I think that the people that are doing that believe what they're saying to be true, and they're actually not necessarily coming from a place of love because they don't know you at all, but actually legitimately feeling like there's this concern that I have for your child or for a child, for an innocent child, because your kid, especially looking at your own, you realize your child really is the epitome of an innocent. This is not 100% dependent on everybody else around him to be everything he needs.
Yeah.
So they are total innocents all the time. So I do think that the rando lady at the grocery store believes that she's trying to be helpful. What she doesn't realize is that perhaps the mom who has spit up going down her shirt, her hair in a ponytail that, let's be honest, certainly is not brushed. It's just yanked back into a rubber band.
Absolutely.
And she's just glad that the sweatpants that she's wearing don't have stains on them. That is not the moment for you to be like, do you know what I think you should be doing? No, lady, please tell me what you think I should be doing with my child right now.
I hate that so much, especially because I tend to notice it's either one of two people. You either get like super crunchy hippie mom who really wants you to do XYZ differently because of whatever reason, or you get super way older person, male or female, I've noticed, doesn't seem to matter, who has a lot of outdated, which is super scary advice, or opinions that like they don't quite understand. Like I was on my phone at, I want to say like Smith's, Walmart, something like that, because I was looking at our grocery list. And somebody was like, he probably needs your attention more than whatever's on your phone.
I remember you calling, you told me about that when you got home.
He was like 3 or 4 months old maybe at the time. So, and he was, by the way, he was staring at me because I had him faced towards me in the cart, in his car seat in the cart. And I needed like 4 things from the frickin' store for dinner. That was it. Because I was still on maternity leave. So I had that ability, whereas like my husband was working back to work full time. And they were like, well, he probably wants your attention. That's probably why he's staring at you and making these noises. And I was like, you don't think I know that? I'm new. I'm not dumb. Like, and I was
well,
so
and I'm talking
mad.
to him up until I looked at my phone to go, what was it? Oh, yeah, spinach.
Right.
I was talking to him. Who do you think I've been talking to walking up and down the aisles?
Or the other flip I get a lot are the people who are irritated that you're doing. So I talk to my son everywhere. Doesn't matter. I'm like, do we need spinach? Can you say spinach? He's 6 months. He can't say spinach. Everybody knows he can't say spinach.
Well, and I told you have to stop talking to him in that super
so
condescending sing-song tone. He's a whole person. You have to stop that sing-song tone.
But so I do that everywhere. Do you see the birds? Is that a white bird or a black bird and stuff like that? And I've had people, and I've heard this like on YouTube and from other moms, where people will stop and be like, they can't understand you.
Sure they can.
And like, okay, so no, he cannot say it's spinach. He cannot tell me that that's a white bird, but he does in fact understand like that I am speaking to him and that he's learning language as we're doing this. I get he's 4 months old and can't say spinach.
So it's funny. Language is a good one before we get to some of the other stuff we want to talk about, because being that we were the only ones in our friend group that had a baby.
Yeah.
We took our baby with us everywhere we went.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So they would go on these trips of people going bowling or out to dinner, and we would do it with a baby. So by the time you were 2, your speech patterns were way advanced for your age.
I'm sure. Because I just heard everything around me all the time.
Well, and if you take everything else to the side separate, because as you know, your brother didn't talk for later. He actually talked. That's not true. Your brother talked earlier than you. He just only said like 5 words.
Yeah.
And then
that was separate from his dedevelopmental though.
That was all tied to other stuff. Yeah. But where you talked in full sentences very, very early.
Refrigerator.
Water from the refrigerator. But I think it's because everybody talked to you. Like all you heard were other adults talking. There was nobody that talked to you like you were a small child.
Yeah.
And I still don't believe in baby talk. I didn't adopt baby talk. I hate baby talk. I have spent I won't mention it because you already yelled at me once about copyright stuff. Yeah. But that whole obnoxious show where all the characters talk in baby talk.
And don't actually say words.
When your brother liked that when we lived overseas and he was very, very little. Mm-hmm. Oh man, it pained me every freaking day because he loved it. And all I could hear was I spent all this time trying to teach him how to talk. And later on, he was in speech therapy. And I'm like,
for something different, but
yeah, unrelated. But I was like, I spent all this time trying to teach my kids how to talk.
Yeah.
And his favorite show right now is where they just make these obnoxious little noises at stuff.
It is really hard. And I have a hard time with the shows that have made up words. I struggle with that a lot just because it seems weird to be like, here's some made up words when you can't say milk.
Here's what, okay. So that's different.
That's hard.
And we talked about, there's some language choice in there on how you parent. Like,
yes,
you've made a point not to make up words for
True.
Things like using the bathroom or you're using anatomically correct scientific names for body parts.
Yes. I won't say like baba for bottle.
But
like that.
You practice using made up words all the time.
I believe
How many times have you looked at your son and like looked at somebody else in the store and gone, oh yeah, baby muggles? That's a made up word.
Muggles is not a made up word.
And no, for our family, it's just a regular part of life, right? But it is.
Muggles is a real word.
You're
it's
like,
in the
that's
dictionary.
my little Gryffindor. That's not a word for this.
They are in fact in the dictionary, so I will use them as normal words. Thank you. But
those are made up words.
They are. To be fair, all words made up
words. But language, I know what you mean though. But the mocking words, the words that are not actually that are an abbreviation of a real word,
True.
But that is not really an abbreviation. It's not like a consonant or not a consonant, contraction.
No,
they're just like this made up ass word.
Yeah, it is hard.
So some of the outdated things that we kind of had talked about, I didn't even get all the same outdated that you did.
No,
but I know that I got some, and I got some that was to me, like that my parents used that were totally normal. So the whiskey on your gums. That will now get you called. CPS is called on your ass for that. But all these babies born in the 60s and 70s, we are all that generation. Because again, 76, I don't care, I'm 45 years old. We were all that. I'm telling you, there's some kind of connection to the fact of why I like rum and whiskey. I'm telling you, has something to do with that. Because when you're teething, they used to rub it on your gums because it made your gums go numb. Realistically, I wonder, yeah, I'm sure it did, but I also wonder if, baby sleeps.
So
little bit of whiskey knocks them right out.
That is such a dangerous piece of advice now.
Well, yeah, and now Child Protective Services will get called on you.
And they should. So you shouldn't give your baby whiskey.
You have heard this story several times. I had a child when I was doing daycare.
Yeah.
Who was incredibly stuffed up and had some kind of massive like sinus infection. And
I do know this story.
He was on medication for it. And his grandmother came from like, I want to say they were Costa Rican or Panamanian, but like from that kind of region of the world. And the baby came back on Monday with like a totally clear nose and could breathe. And you could tell that he was happy. And the mom was mortified because her mother-in-law had streaked the baby's tongue with jalapeno juice, which had caused all of the sinuses to flush out.
Right.
The baby could breathe. She's like, I couldn't believe she did that. And I said, don't tell, you got to stop telling people. Because Child Protective Services is going to get called on you because you can't do that.
So this is one of those things where I feel like some old world tricks work.
Right, but they're not safe.
So that probably hurt the baby for a minute.
No,
probably
so if you think about it in terms of like, it probably blistered his tongue.
Probably. But was it long term? Was a blister on the tongue better than not being able to breathe? Probably.
It depends. Yeah. So there's something about it though. They will tell you it's not safe.
Which I get, but again, some old world tricks work for a reason.
Right. But on the same note, I can promise you that as your child is teething right now, if I put rum on his gums, you're gonna lose your mind on me.
I sure will.
Although if I would, it would be good quality rum and probably one with fruit. I'm just saying. I bet you I could get like that banana rum. I bet you your kid would love that if it wasn't. By the way, before you yell at us, I'm not actually going to give my grandchild banana rum. Not till he's 21. So calm down.
But that is something that like some outdated advice. Yeah.
I remember when you were born, when you were little and you had a raging fever and we couldn't get it to come down. And somebody had said, you need to put her in a cool bath.
Absolutely not.
That is now something they tell you not. That's been something they told you not to do. And then conversely, though, they told my best friend to put her son into a bath, and he's a year younger than you. Told him put him in a tepid bath because his fever was so high and they couldn't bring it down. So there's some of that outdated advice that I almost want to say, if bounce it off your doctor and make sure. But
Always
there's so
bounce
many,
it off your doctor. That's pretty much
especially anything old
universal
world
advice.
like that. You know, some of the other outdated stuff that we heard were things like prop them up with a bottle. Right? You've got stuff to do. You put a pillow. I cannot tell you the number of people I've seen do this. They put a pillow next to an infant, put the bottle on the pillow, and that way it is feeding the baby for you. That is actually something. And then they go do whatever, right? Now doctors will be like, oh my God, your baby's going to choke. Don't do that. But that was total normal advice. Wedge your kid into the couch with a pillow while they take a nap on the couch.
Okay, so I remember you doing this, like, he couldn't have been more than about 2 weeks old. I want to say, like my father my dad and my husband had like pre-made plans to go to like wrestling. Yep. So it was like the first week I was postpartum, maybe week 2 at most.
No. So by the date, your child was 4 days old.
Oh,
5 days old.
Super. So it was very, very early. We got him into
his actually come home from the hospital like
only 2 days before.
Yeah, because remember he actually had to stay. I do remember that
because they were.
It was like the 5th or the 6th.
You're right.
Yep.
And they were actually saying like, hey, we might need to rehospitalize your son. That's another one. We'll get to that too. But one of the big things is that you set him up and propped him in our couch. There was like a pillow to block it off. And we were just chilling because you and I were watching a movie upstairs.
So I had him on the cushion between us.
Yeah.
And didn't take a pillow. What I did was I rolled the blanket into
that's what it was.
And I put it like this. So it was like a side barrier.
Tube. Yep.
But because we were sitting there with him, really part of that was to keep the dogs away from him.
Yeah, I've got 2 little
But he
yippies.
was happy there between us. And it's not like the difference is people used to do that and leave the room.
Absolutely
so
not.
He was sitting between us while we were eating. Yeah. And he was fine. But that was one of those things. But I mean, prop it up. So what they would have done is that same idea, but stuck the bottle in there.
Absolutely not.
I could see doing it off of necessity. So the cereal bottle, right? Your brother, for multiple reasons,
I have hard opinions on the cereal bottle.
He fell off the growth chart. He was really, really small, and they were very worried. And so, I absolutely disagreed with the cereal bottle.
Yeah,
but not with you. With you, I used a cereal bottle because it was the advice they were giving you. The doctors were like, "Oh, hey, now to be honest, you slept through the night by the time you were like 6 weeks old, 8 weeks old. You took a bottle at 11, went to sleep, slept till 7 o'clock in the morning." 6 o'clock in the morning. Your brother didn't sleep through the night till he was 12.
Right.
But he was so little and they were so worried about him. And they were trying to get me to spoon feed him baby cereal. And it had to be so thin that it was not working. It was a total nightmare every time. He wasn't taking any in and he would just scream. And I was nursing.
And he didn't
grow
for a year. So I was
pumping him the milk for the cereal that I was watching dump out. And then they switched it up. And as much as we were joking around about it during the formula shortage last year, where they were like, nobody's been told to give this advice in more than 50 years about the condensed milk
and like
evaporated milk
and like Caro sauce or something.
Caro syrup, evaporated milk, and water.
Yeah, you were given that advice.
That was what I was sent home by the pediatrician and told to go make. And then to use that to make his bottles and to make sure he had cereal or oatmeal in every bottle he had. Plus, he stayed on an Insta feeder for cereal because they had to measure how much he ate every day. I had to measure and say, I offered him this much, he ate this much. I offered him this much, he ate this much. For every freaking meal we had. And I actually don't agree anymore with cereal bottles. I think they're a bad idea.
And now they know they're not good for your kid.
Well, they knew it then.
But my little brother grew a whole whopping, 5 pounds between his come home date and his first birthday.
Correct.
That's what you're supposed to gain in 2 months.
Your son right now is the same weight your brother was on his first birthday.
My son is actually
small
growing.
For his age.
Yeah, he's small and he is growing faster. Actually, by I bet you 18 months,
your brother
he'll
did
be
the same
bigger.
thing. He stretched out, but didn't gain weight. So before we go, I was going to say we were going to get off on a tangent here, but that is apparently how the boys in our family, my family in particular, just grow. They don't gain weight for years and years and years, and then it all starts tacking on all of a sudden.
And then they're 6 foot.
But that difference of they did tell me with you to do the cereal bottle with you, and
holy crap, no
we
way.
did. And then with your brother, they told us you have to, not even a choice, you have to give him this. And then now you will make a pediatrician like their eyes bug out and they're like lose their freaking mind. If you're like, I'm going to do a cereal bottle, your pediatrician's going to go bananas.
I checked in because that was actually something we heard from my grandmother, who's youngest, because you're her youngest.
I'm the youngest, yep.
Was born in the late 70s. And so she kept telling me, like, you're eventually going to need to do a cereal bottle. And I went to my doctor with it, my pediatrician, and I was like, what is this? I hear about it online. I hear about it from family members. What is this? And although my pediatrician is she's very direct and she's very, very polite, but she was like, do not do that. That is absolute horrible advice now. We know it's not good for your kid. And it actually, and she got into like this whole thing as to why she as a pediatrician believes it's not good for our son. She goes, there might be extenuating circumstances. Your son doesn't have them. And I was like, great. So we're not doing that. And she goes, don't give him cereal, period. Even when you start with food, don't start with like puff rice cereal, which is really common.
So it's different cereal, but that's what you and I've talked a ton about this.
Yeah. Cause I won't give my son cereal now. And he's been eating solid foods for about a month.
But some of those things are really important of what you said. One is the extenuating circumstances.
Yes.
It's just like that person in Walmart where you just want to go, you know, this much about my life. Seriously, walk away before I cut you. I haven't slept. You know, when we very first moved here, your brother was sick as all crap.
My brother was sick.
By the way, I'm struggling to not cuss, just so you know out there in YouTube land. It's killing me. No, when he was about 4, and we had just PCS'd here.
Yeah, because we were in Italy for his first 4 years.
Pouring rain. And I couldn't keep anything down in your brother. He couldn't keep anything down. So they had said, oh, you need to go. I was like, I got to get him some 7-Up because I got to keep something in his system.
Because he was like 4 or 5 at this point.
We had just barely moved here.
So very little.
Like I still was finding the store.
Oh, I didn't realize
we hadn't even unpacked. We hadn't even gotten our baggage yet. I was still finding the store. And I went and I found the store, and your brother threw up in the parking lot right outside the doors of the grocery store. And the woman in the grocery store just looks at me, and she was like, do you think that you really should be bringing him in here? And I admit, not one of my finest moments as a parent or as a human being, probably, because I turned around and I was like, no, lady, I don't think I should be bringing him in here. But I don't know anybody. I just moved to this godforsaken state. I barely found the freaking grocery store. I need to come in here and get my child some saltine crackers and some Sprite. So you standing there judging me is doing what exactly?
Was this on base?
No.
Oh, okay, that makes more sense. I was going to say.
And she was like, and I said, so I'm really sorry he's throwing up, but that's why I'm trying to just get in here, get my 2 items and go home so I can take my sick child and go home. So could you think you could either help me out or move out of my way? And she was like, here's a bag in case he throws up in the store. I was like, thank you. Now move.
Was this an employee?
Yes.
I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
I always thought this was just somebody like there.
Nope, it was an employee. And I'm sure to her perspective, I was walking in there with a puking kid. Well, yes, lady, I'm walking in here with a puking kid because I don't have a choice. I'm not leaving him in the car.
Not at 4 years old.
I wouldn't have anyway. But that goes back to your outdated advice, right? Because I cannot tell you the number of times I remember being left in a car. We didn't have, the scar on my forehead. It's from a car accident because we didn't have car seats like they have now, or like even that they had when you were a kid.
Holy cow. So that actually is like something I love to bring up. I have a relative on Facebook I'm married to that relative, not to that relative. I'm married to that family. And they posted a picture of like car seats in the 60s and 70s. And I was like,
basically to like hold your kid in place. It wasn't a safety.
Like a metal swing.
Yeah, it was not a safety thing. It's just so you don't have a toddler crawling around on your feet.
Right. And so I made a comment on that. I was like, holy cow, they're so different. Like, because my kid has this ridiculous car seat. But I was like, oh, wow, this is so different. My kid has could probably go to space in this car seat. And thank you to my grandparents, because actually my grandparents banded together and bought us a very, very expensive stroller and car seat set that we really, really wanted. It was really, really expensive, and we appreciate it because it had amazing ratings. But I made this joke about this car seat, and they sent me a message privately off the comments on Facebook, kind of just like, you don't need all that. It's ridiculous that you have all that.
Swing in the front of a car. It's fine.
Yeah, you don't need all that. It's fine. It's better for them. They're going to teach them to grow up in an only like a very, I wish I could remember exactly how they said it, but they said something to the
It's
effect
almost
of,
one of those things about these decisions are making weak children.
basically.
Okay, so here's the problem with the weak children concept in
my
that
son has
particular
no neck yet. Like,
well, no, and in that particular scenario, you're comparing weak children as far as like against the metal of a car coming at you going 80 miles an hour.
right.
This is not a weak child. This is the equivalent of saying, oh, I'm sorry, my child is not a superhero, so he's not going to survive the 80-mile-an-hour car coming at him.
This is not, super
That's
baby.
dumb.
No, I remember
They
very
are
distinct.
dumb.
It was the dumbest message I got. And I actually remember like it was one of those messages I just looked at my phone and just twisted it to David so he could see. I was like, did you see this?
But here's what's funny about that. They actually think they're trying to give you advice because there is a lot of old school things that still work.
Yes.
There are. So people, you can do it all you want. And we've talked about there's all these different methods and 1,000 different things of the way that you feed your son.
Baby-led weaning, as we've talked about this a lot, because it's called...
I think it's a stupid word.
Right, because it's called baby-led weaning now. But
it is how poor people have fed their kids forever. You make the baby what you're making for dinner because that's how you eat when you're broke.
And so I remember calling you and telling you that we were gonna limit his pureed foods because we were going to do it more like when because this is a little peek into my life. I was a daycare kid, and because like either you were at home daycare,
until you were 5.
Yeah, either because you did at home daycare for a while.
Oh no, until you were 10. I stopped when we moved here.
Right. But my son has a nanny, which is ridiculous. So our nanny gives him pureed foods, and then for breakfast and for dinner, he eats what we eat.
But your nanny gives him pureed foods too that you make because it's one of your hippy dippy claims, and even who call it that realize that. There's a lot of people that did that for generations. Yeah. It wasn't a choice. It was out of necessity. Kids ate
mine's
whatever.
Out of choice, to be honest with you.
It is, but like when you even told me about it at first, you were like, so I feel like this is a stupid bougie word and you're not going to hate it, which you were right. Yeah. It is a stupid bougie word and I do hate it.
I know you do.
Because I can't even remember what the freak you call it most of the time, but it's because, we just feed the baby what we're eating within reason. I'm not giving him a Carolina Reaper.
I mean, no.
I mean, we're not trying to do that. We're not giving him pork or peanut butter or honey. So within reason, but...
I'm so scared to give him peanut butter. I know I need to, but I'm terrified.
We'll let you do it, but yeah.
But that is something like
those are all advice that like,
more outdated. Yep.
It is because now they're like, oh, wait, you should. Now, there is also something to be said about things like long grain rice will fill his belly 100% because his belly is only this big.
Right.
And the rice swells. So... There's something to be said about that kind of stuff too.
And every time you think you're out of the woods with your like not needed or outdated advice.
This. I know how to be a mom now. And then something throws you for a loop and you're like, wait, I'm dumb.
Well, and not just that, but like I thought I was good. I thought I was done getting unsolicited advice after about month 3.
No, you're 27 years old. I still get parenting advice for people like, do you know what I would do? No, but
I'm 27 and I don't live with you. What do you mean?
So outdated advice. Just because I want to touch on this because we talked a lot about it after your son was born.
So much.
Choosing to breastfeed it's always been a choice. I believe for some people it works, for others it doesn't. So when I had you and I tried to nurse you and I was not successful after about 2 weeks. That's all I could nurse.
Yeah. I don't remember this. I remember this story.
Crazy pants.
I remember this story.
And then everybody was telling me it's just because you're doing it wrong. If you just did this, then it will be fine. And it was never, ever, ever fine. It was never fine. And they would tell me, your daughter's never going to bond with you because you didn't nurse her. Your daughter's never going to, you guys aren't going to have a closeness.
Joke's on you.
I would love to find those people because I'm like, not only do I talk to her 10, 15 times a day, she was like, I shall be a grown-up and go live somewhere else. The furthest you've ever lived from me was 45 minutes.
True.
And then when you guys looked to buy a house, you literally bought a house around the corner. And we joke around about it because your husband is like, it's just the lot I have in life is I live around the corner from my in-laws.
Yeah.
And just accepts that as fact. Because I can't tell you the number of times you've said, I'm so glad you guys just live around the corner. I don't know what we would do.
I really don't, especially after my son was born, and it was so difficult.
Your demon baby moments where you're like, we haven't slept, and he's screaming, and we don't know what's wrong with him,
and we need someone to come tap us out.
We just need somebody to rock him for 5 minutes while we take him. Those kind of things. To be fair, it's only happened twice or 3 times ever.
Maybe 3, but like it's good having that because it does mean like for safety, we can tap out, which is a huge thing.
And I've told you a million times to tell anybody,
privilege.
If you have to put him in a crib and shut a door because he's crying,
always better.
Do that. And then you'll feel like crap, because you'll feel terrible. You'll feel terrible as a mother but the fact that you did that actually makes you a better mom.
Yep.
That is one of those pieces of parenting advice that we set ourselves up for. But the outdated part of the whole, you have to nurse your kid for you to bond. No. Because if that were true, then like people who cannot nurse, people who adopt their babies, people who take in their siblings' children, or the grandmothers who take in their grandchildren, or whatever it is.
However that plays out.
I dare you to tell me I haven't bonded with your child. I never nursed him one single minute of his life. But I dare somebody to tell me I'm not bonded with that baby.
Well, and one of the things I hate about that is that just like blanket stating like, hey, this is the best way to go.
Oh yeah, it's such a crock.
It's a crock. And then there's a lot of I feel like a lot of disrespect. Because like I chose not to breastfeed.
Right.
I hated it. I didn't like pumping. Like all of that was way too hard for me, and I didn't love it on an emotional level. However, that is annoying. And when we're at that point, you're just there. Like it's just terrible things. But if you are a parent because you have taken on a child in some way, like you were like all those examples you just mentioned, and just blanket stating, because you don't know, and just blanket stating to somebody, oh, you're giving him a bottle? Well, don't you know breast is best? Okay, well, I'm his aunt and I took him in because his mom just died. So thanks for that.
But do I know breast is best? Yes, because just like you, I've talked to the pediatrician.
Breast milk is best, not breastfeeding.
So here's where I would still throw a caveat. You're right. That is the best option to go. It does do certain things for them. However, like in your case, I couldn't do anymore. No. They were jacking around with my hormones.
Yep.
My nipple cracked. And so when everybody else was talking about how this was this amazing moment, this was not an amazing moment for me. I was crying. Everybody was always telling me, you're doing it wrong. And let me tell you, everybody, your grandma on both sides were like, well, you know what you should do? No, what should I do? And they both told me something different. The La Leche League people tell you something different. Everybody's like, you know what you should do? No random person. I don't know what I should do. You know, you have a little girl dressed in blue. Do you know you're doing it wrong?
I put my son in a neutral color not too long ago, and people were like, boy or girl? And I was like, doesn't matter. And they did not appreciate that answer.
So you were actually in a little blue sweatsuit that had big old huge, like it had blue flowers all over it. And somebody in the store was like, ironically, you'd probably wear it now as an adult because the knee patches and the hood were different than the rest of the outfit.
Perfect. I sure would.
And they were like, you dressed a little girl in blue. So my little girl had the biggest, bluest eyes ever. So yeah, I dressed her in blue.
I mean, that's why I put my son in blues, because he also
really
has
good in blue.
Yeah.
So
my son has these giant blue eyes. Look like giant sapphires.
Yeah, I told you, he looks very much like you. But the number of people that'll just stand around and tell you, you're doing it wrong, you're doing it wrong, you're doing it wrong. That luckily, or unluckily, depending on how you want to look at it, has not changed. But what's so stupid about that is you're doing it wrong is based on what happened to that rando person and their kid.
Yeah.
And going into your second child, you cannot hold on to those things. The stuff that worked for the first one might work for the second. Great, more power to you. However, not always. Because again, my kids, one slept through the night. Yeah. My second didn't sleep through the night till he was 12. I nursed him every freaking day until he was a year old. And he did not grow. Long. Yeah. And he didn't grow. And he was super, super sick. You had not gotten sick. The first time you ever had antibiotics, you were 2. Your brother had to have them at 5 months old because that was the first time he got pneumonia. And now they would call it RSV. What your brother ended up with, which was just chronic pneumonia for like that first year, they would now have classified it as RSV.
Probably.
But all the things where you think you're like going into it going, I know this is going to work. No, that's what worked for that kid. And if you're lucky, it works for the next kid. If you're not, it doesn't. And that is carried from infancy through toddlers.
Apparently into adulthood.
Yeah, absolutely. So even when you guys were older, right? I could tell your brother, I'm taking your phone. He was like, here you go. I'd be like, you're grounded. He was like
the end of my life.
He's like, you're grounded. Your brother was like, cool. For you, yeah. Oh my God, the world had just come to an end because I took your freaking phone.
I'm not gonna lie. I'm 27. If someone took my phone right now and just kept it for a week,
it's going to fall off.
Yeah. Yep. I don't know I don't know how I'd function, honestly. But there's a lot of like, what are some of the things that, like, cause you got a lot of advice and you gave me a lot of advice. And I will say you tried very, very hard. And you acknowledge this a lot, to not be that mom and not be that mom that's like, well, let me just give you some advice.
No, I always ask you the same thing.
Hard.
Basically, I used to ask you, are you whining?
Yeah.
Or venting, or are you looking for help?
Right.
Are you looking for sympathy or solutions? Is really what it comes down to.
Which we still use for other things unrelated. We still use that phrase a lot. And it's one I would highly encourage people to use with their...
we actually call it sympathy or honesty.
You can't kick that because that's a camera.
Oh, sorry.
But
sympathy or honesty is what we call it.
It's true.
And what are you looking for? And sometimes it was sympathy for a couple days, and you're like, okay, you got any ideas?
Now I need a solution. Yeah.
But there's a lot where I always want to tell people, and you and I've discussed this, and I've tried to be really honest about it, and that is talk to the pediatrician, because I'm going off of data that at my very best, that even if you take when I stopped doing childcare, is 15 years old.
Yeah, it's pretty old.
From when I stopped having an infant, 22.
Which is just
22 years since I've had an infant. And so anything that I'm doing, I'm operating under advice that was what they knew between 22 and 27 years ago. So I don't know, maybe they've changed it. Some of the stuff cycles through, what you call it, baby-led, whatever.
Baby-led weaning.
Whatever. Blah, blah, blah. Bougie word. Feed the baby what you're eating.
Yeah.
That is with the exception of what you think is going to cause an allergy because of problems related to your child. Sorry, production. Because of the problems that are in your family or the history in your own family.
Absolutely.
What would you say is the biggest thing that you got that was completely untrue? And then what was the one that was absolutely true that you hadn't expected?
The one that I got that was completely untrue and was just something that I hated hearing was the use a cereal bottle to make your baby sleep.
Except your baby didn't have a hard time sleeping.
So here's the thing. In his first few weeks, we were required to, he tried to sleep through his feedings.
I remember, yeah.
He still does. Like if we would let him sleep through his nap times and feedings.
He's a big love of sleep. He does.
Boy's a sloth. He'll sleep through anything.
He likes his sleep.
But that was one that I was not, like people were like, babies don't sleep and you have to do a cereal bottle to get them to sleep. Like I had a relative who told me that they gave their like 6-week-old
2 months.
2 months. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about. Mm-hmm. I gave them a cereal bottle to make them sleep. It was not you. But
I did. I also heard the story.
But I refused to do that. I still do. Like I don't do the cereal bottles at all. But everybody was like, babies are such hard sleepers. Now he's a little older. He's a little bit more difficult.
But again, it depends on who it is. Hard sleeper, my ass. Because we could have carried in the house by 1 foot. We've told you the story literally your whole life.
Yeah.
We could carry you inside the house from the car by 1 foot, hanging, dangling like the pendulum on a clock, man. And you were like, whatever, I'm asleep. Your brother, if you creaked the freaking bedroom door open, your brother's like, I'm awake now. And he was up for hours.
No, my kid he does not have that. He does not have, people are like, oh my God, they don't sleep. It's just awful. And they don't sleep. No, my kid slept like a champ. And the only reason we had to do the get up.
You messed him up.
Till I messed him up. But he slept like a champ. The only reason he didn't was because we had to get him out.
Right.
So he was severely jaundiced when he was born. And it was terrifying, right? He had to be under the blue lights. There were actually like a bunch of tests. Like they kept redoing his tests and they kept saying, hey, if his number goes back up, we have to readmit him.
Right.
So
and then he stayed one extra day.
And then he stayed an extra day in the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got him home and I was talking to one of my relatives about it. And I was honestly having a bit of a breakdown because I'm a brand new mom. They won't give me my kid. They just gave me my kid. And now they're we're going to take him back.
Can I guess what the advice was?
Put him out in the sun.
So that was literally what they told me with you and your brother. Take him out in the sun.
They said, so also.
Right now the hospital's like, oh my God, don't do that.
Well, I will clarify two things. One, my brother was born in June. I was born in October. My son was born at the end of January.
But that was okay. So if the argument would be that it has to do with UV or any of that stuff, the UV lights that were in June would have been more intense because of where your brother was born.
In theory.
And here they were like, do not put your baby out in the sun. And I was like, that's literally exactly what. And so that's at least been 50 years of advice because it's what I was told with you.
It's terrifying.
I know it's what your grandparents were told with your uncles.
Yes.
But they were also told, everybody was told, put your baby in the sun. Apparently we have a whole jaundice thing. I don't know.
Nope. They were like, do not do that. Keep him under these lights. Never take him out of these lights.
Yeah.
It was,
well,
it was
so his was
upsetting.
really bad. So what was that
was my best piece of advice.
What was the one you thought wouldn't be accurate and was?
Okay. So I don't love this and I'm not like terribly happy with it.
Are you going to tell me I was right about something?
No.
You should, because I'm sure I was right. So
I'm
you should
sure
just tell
you
me.
were, but the one that you may have been right about this one. Don't like necessarily wake them up all the way to do their middle of the night feed. Go ahead and dream feed them, which
That one was not me.
That one was not you. I'm sure you
because I didn't have that option. You slept right through, and when your brother was awake, he was awake. There was no half-ass sleepy thing.
No, we got to do dream feeding, which is where basically the baby's not fully awake. You're just up and you prop them up and you start to feed them, and they're like not really awake.
But that's because he had to be woken up to eat. But no, but there.
What advice did you think I was going to say was the best?
So honestly, I'm not really sure. But you need to say something about the advice that I gave you that was 100% right, because you didn't do that yet. Now that needs to happen.
I don't know what advice you gave me.
Nothing pains you more than having to own when I was right.
Not anymore. With my kid.
That is so not true.
With my kid, I've gotten a lot more loosey-goosey with my you were right, because my kid has been the biggest learning curve of my life.
But I think that's true of everybody. But
I don't know. What was something that you told me?
I told you all kinds of stuff.
Okay.
Do you pay attention? We literally talked so much that your husband said, let me just start recording it. So what did I tell you that I was right about? Like 1,000,001 things.
So fair, I probably just instituted it and never thought twice.
I would say stuff like the blankets. If your kid doesn't want to sleep with a blanket, put them in thicker pajamas. I know that I told you that one.
I love that advice. It's very good.
And the bags. Nope, sleeping bags. That was one.
That's it. That is
the pajamas
yours.
were their feet, because I had kickers. All my babies were kickers, and he's a kicker. So find the pajamas that are a sack thing.
We do sleep sacks exclusively. I do not put them in anything else anymore.
Because that works. And then I would say the other piece of advice that I know that I gave you that I think you actually really did take as a parent was the let us help you while we're here.
Holy crap. Yeah. So that's a whole different...
Not the whole, you should sleep while your baby sleeps, because I don't know who the idiot is that says that. But when my baby, especially my last one, when my second baby slept, that's when my first baby got their one-on-one attention. So there was no, oh, hey, the baby's asleep. Mommy's going to go take a nap. That wasn't even a thing.
That is like the biggest advice if I could give anybody any advice. If you're listening, like we said in the last video, you didn't pay attention to the first half of this show, like pay attention to this little
piece. Yep.
Always when someone is going to come to you and say, hey, do you want me to come hold the baby so that you can take a break? Whatever that break is going to be, just take it. You've literally come over and held my son while he was sleeping so I could sleep. You've also come over and done laundry for me. You've come over and said, hey, I just cleaned you're notorious. You do my dishes. That is like your helping hand.
Because you don't do dishes. And I actually love your husband who does all the dishes.
That is like your thing, is that you will do dishes.
It's also because I see the dishes and it like eats at me. And I really think you guys are like, oh, wait, she's coming, so just leave the dishes. Because she'll stare at him until she gets awkwardly over there doing dishes.
But that is something that I didn't know. And the other piece that you were very much correct about was when they get overwhelming.
This is my favorite part, by the way.
That you're correct.
All the parts where you're telling me why I'm right, yeah.
The other one is if you're overwhelmed, if you're tired, if your baby is still screaming.
Oh my God, speak up.
Speak up, call somebody, call a friend. If you have good friends, any of my best friend would have driven down from Salt Lake in the middle of the night if I had been like, oh my God, he won't stop screaming and I don't know what to do. She would have had her ass here, man.
But part of that, I think, is the whole belief that when you become a mom, they tell you this whole load of garbage about everything's going to come natural and you're just going to know and your instincts are going to kick in. There's something to be said about some of your instincts kicking in.
It's not natural.
But one of the other ones that happen is the shame associated with that. You're like, how come I remember, and I told you this before, I remember crying when I couldn't nurse you because everybody was yelling at me that this was the most natural thing in the world. And like we said at the beginning, I was 17 when I got pregnant. I was 18 when you were born.
Yes.
And I had all these people that would say things like, it's going to come natural to you. And I was like, but I can't nurse. And here was the most natural. I put that in air quotes because that is not true. It is hard. It is hard to breastfeed. It is hard to get into that thing. It's hard to feel comfortable with it. Right. Random people are like, well, let me help you. And so some la leche woman is feeling you up, trying to force your nipple into your kid's mouth. And you're like, there's nothing that feels normal or natural about this. This is all super awkward.
And kind of degrading, it sounds like.
And absolutely shame-filled, yes. Yeah. I remember crying because I thought, this is the most natural thing in the whole world, and I'm screwing it up. I can't do this. They're going to take my baby away. Because
they didn't. I'm here.
Right. But I remember being so worried about that because I was young and everybody was like, oh, you had a baby too young.
So it sounds like
I know I had a baby young.
Yeah.
And so I know that I'm just going to get some things wrong. But that's definitely one of those things where it was 100%. It's all going to come to you just naturally. That is such a crock. It is not going to all come to you naturally. It is hard. You have to learn how to parent. There are aspects of it. I think loving your kid comes natural. Having patience for your child's crap, not natural. You have to learn that if you are not a naturally patient person. I think that I'm aware.
I'm not a naturally patient person.
I'm really, truly that weird, awkward thing where you're like, this little human being is really the only thing I've ever done in my life that matters this much.
Yep.
That natural. Being like, how do I survive on 2 hours and 15 minutes of sleep over 25 hours? How do I do that? Not natural.
So it kind of sounds like your piece of advice would be like to almost like ignore the guilt, ignore the shame.
Absolutely.
Because you need to get the help.
No, and ask for it when you need it, and don't be ashamed that you did. You've asked me a million times, how did I do this with your brother? I had a 5-year-old, I had a newborn. My husband was working full time all the time.
Yeah.
Sometimes weekends too. And I lived far away from any family. I didn't even know anybody when we got to Europe because we got there and your brother was 10 weeks old and I was all by myself.
Yeah.
And you have asked me a million times, I don't know how you did this without help. And I just did. But just because I did doesn't mean that you should be like,
no,
well, that means I should be able to do this. No,
absolutely not.
Don't guess wrong. If you think you need help, be like, I need somebody to just keep the baby long enough for me to take a shower. Because sometimes I just need to take a shower, man. Can I just eat a bowl of cereal with cold milk because after a while you get hot? Or can I have a hot meal?
Hot coffee.
That didn't have to be reheated 3 times and doesn't have pockets of dried out food, right?
Before we're about to wrap, but one of the things I do want to like kind of call out is that even now I get every dinner that I have with you and my stepdad, every meal I get is hot. Because for months, your whole point was you're like, I can do this. I can give my kid this by taking her kid. And so there were times.
We genuinely enjoy it.
Well, yeah, but there were times where like, I remember we went to brunch to a very nice place and my kid started like really having a bad time. It was a lot. He was super overwhelmed. And I was like, and I just got Eggs Benedict. It's the first time I'd had Eggs Benedict in 10 months. I was very, very excited. And I was like, I'm going to have to put this down so that I can go and take care of my kid because he's just freaking out. And you gave me like this gift of a hot Eggs Benedict. And it was like around Easter too.
It was Easter. Yeah.
And it was just absolutely like, that's one of those big things that you've always done, especially since my son has been born, that you have always made sure that I get the hot meal. Even if it means that your own meal has gotten cold, I get the hot meal, which is a huge deal.
Well, and so the other day when we had him and we went to breakfast and he fell asleep.
Asleep.
He fell asleep while we were waiting to get into the restaurant. And so I ended up holding him on asleep, and I was eating my food. And
how it be sometimes.
His papa was like, "Oh, do you want me to take him?" I said, "No, I've done this a million times." And Papa was like, "Me too." And it just was because
just how it is.
Because it'll be that way, right? So if we can do that for you,
it's always
that's
wonderful.
Good. So I think though, as you're starting to wrap, I would say one of the best things that I learned over time, having had my kids as old as I do now, and realizing that to all those people who were like, "Oh, if you don't do this, this is going to happen." I talk to both of my children every single day. I have dinner with one or both of you almost every day. I still have one-on-one conversations with each of you every single day. So those things, so all those people that were like, your baby will never bond with you. My baby bonded with me. All my babies bonded with me. But the other thing is, will this matter? So sometimes you have to just take that back, take a look at that and go, okay, it's
in 5 years, what's going to matter?
Pajamas, right? The clothes matching and all that stuff. You're big on that. You love all that. You always have.
That's a choice I make though, because it's something that's important to me.
I understand.
Not something everybody should be doing if it's going to take up too much of your time.
There's things about going in public and my kid being clean. I was very much adamant about that. I'm adamant about it with my grandchild. I'm not. Yeah. I have a thing about you going out and being clean. But sometimes with some of this stuff, is it going to matter in 5 years? If you had to ask me to hold him so you could take a shower, nobody is going to, in 5 years, that one moment is not going to be the moment where your kid's like, so we would have bonded, Mom, but see that shower you took? That's what took us out.
But in what's crazy, in contrast, the one moment of getting my hot eggs Benedict, that is something your child will remember forever that I got. My son's never going to remember that you were the one holding him his first Easter.
So ironic. So I remember that only because you told the story, and because, let's be honest, it happened just a few months back. If it had been like, if we were not talking about it in terms of your child being 5, I probably would have zero memory of that.
That was such a big deal to me.
It was such a small thing.
I also want to note here too is that my husband's really good at equal parenting. He
and
does,
then some, yeah,
and like freaking awesome at the 50-50 split with parenting. I usually get cold breakfast but hot dinner because my husband takes him for dinners most days. I do breakfast. So like, I want to clarify, this is not like I don't ever get hot meals or anything. My husband's really, really good about making sure that I get hot meals.
So I will say this.
Want to note that.
But part of that note is because I didn't.
Yeah.
Because whatever you guys needed, I stopped, I did whatever. But part of that now, you have a different perspective. It's how I chose to be your mom. It's the ways that I did these things to be your mom. Doesn't mean that you love your son less than I love you.
No.
It means that was just how I chose to do it.
Parent.
Sure. But there's a ton to be said about, does this matter? Will it matter in 5 years? Because right now, I have a child that was nursed every single day of his life. I have a child that was not. You had your brother was very, very sick until he was about 5, just with everything. He would get everything in the whole world.
Right.
You never did.
Right.
And then when your brother was, I don't know, 5 to now, he very rarely gets sick.
He gets sick all the time.
You went through this whole thing. Yeah. So does any of that stuff matter? Nobody really knows. I don't care what they say. I don't know that they really know that, like, well, if you had nursed her, she wouldn't have gotten strep at 25. Really? You think that's what it is? And I feel like that is a total crock because, yeah. But that kind of stuff is, you just have to ask, is this going to matter? Do I need to go take a bath bad enough? The baby's crying in the bathtub or crying in the crib while you're taking a shower. He is not going to be scarred by that for the rest of his life. If you go take 3 minutes and go take a shower, especially as long as he's safe. That is the biggest thing. Is your kid safe? Is your kid safe and healthy and happy? For the most part, if that's your answer 90% of the time, then you're doing just fine.
Good to go.
And tell all the other people with their bad advice to zip it. Because there's always going to be, like, we're going to have to revisit this topic as your child gets older.
Absolutely.
Potty training is going to be a thing. Because you will have tons of free advice, some good, some bad, some where you're like, WTF did you just say to me?
For sure.
Right. So you're going to have all these different things, and the books that you can find. Stand in a bookstore anywhere about parenting and you'll find this is everything you should do in your first year. You guys should, you're way behind because you haven't quizzed your child on the periodic tables since he's been born.
I'm sorry, wait. Production,
wait.
have we?
You have not. But I remember I got the song, so it's on my playlist that I play with him. For productions.
For production.
But there's somebody out there who's going to tell you that.
True. I do want to end this. 2 things I really, really want to point out. 1, if you are a new parent who is struggling for any reason, there are resources for you. If you are a mom struggling with things that you feel like could be any sort of postpartum anxiety, postpartum depression, anything, please go see your doctor. That is real and it kills women. Go see your doctor if you find yourself being one of those women who can't leave the house.
It also destroys the family.
It destroys families,
just kill
marriages.
The women. It destroys everything in that. It can destroy the environment.
Please go and get help if you think you are like struggling with anything like that. Because as we've talked about in other podcasts, like, love yourself enough to take care of yourself too. Love your family enough to take care of yourself too. There's nothing pithy to say after that. And I really have no desire to, because I don't want to cheapen the message of go get help if you need it. So with that, if you have made it this far and you enjoyed our conversation, go ahead and like and subscribe and actually go watch some of our other past videos, because we are now on like episode 3. Woohoo! I know. This 7th recording, 3 episodes out of it.
Right.
But thank you so much for watching. We will go ahead and post soon about the newest episode.
So before you're going to probably edit this part, you might want to throw in there that do you have a link for one of those places that that is recommended for postpartum? So I was just going to throw that out there.
I will also link
something
down here, resources,
just
local
a few,
resources,
though, not all.
Not everything.
Yeah, they're everywhere.
But definitely go, like, your number 1 resource is going to be your pediatrician, your doctor. Go, please talk to them if you feel like you're having problems.
So I actually disagree with your pithy thing, and here it is.
Here's your pithy.
Sort of. So I recognize that certain religions do not agree with postpartum depression, postpartum psychosis,
Anxiety.
postpartum anxiety, any of those. I recognize that there are certain celebrities who have very openly said that it is completely untrue and blah, 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 blah. And all I can tell you is it's not worth the chance.
Never.
Don't take the chance. And honestly, this is, go see your doctor. I wouldn't worry too much about what, the celebrity says about anything.
They don't care about you.
But
Care
don't
about
take
theirs.
the chance that it is. If you go and they're like, no, I don't think these qualify as symptoms, you've lost absolutely nothing. But if you go and they say these do qualify as symptoms, then you can personally write to that celebrity and tell them that they can suck it because it is real.
Absolutely. But we do
That was my pithy.
I think that's a good pithy. But yeah, thank you so much. We will go ahead and post about our next episode coming up next week. All right. Bye.
You're supposed to say like and subscribe at the end, right?
Oh, I am. Like, subscribe. I did all that already.
You're supposed to do it again at the end, aren't you?
I did.
As you're closing. You did not.
I sure did.
I
So
don't
if you've
think you
made
did.
it this far, like, I'm keeping all of this in. I'm not editing any of this out, just for the record.
So to be fair, it's just because you talk a lot. So it's possible you said any of that stuff and I might have missed it because you've been yammering for a while.
Oh my goodness. Like, subscribe, and we will post about our new episode coming soon. Thank you. Bye.